Welcome to lesson number 2 of Weather School, live Monday, March 30th, straight up 1 o'clock. Parents and teachers, you need to go do something right now. Make sure the kiddos are... Oh, good. I have viewers in Kansas City. I want to say hello to Ollie Hightower in Kansas City, Kansas City, Missouri. Thanks for watching. So it's not just Arkansas. We are, of course, the World Wide Web, right? Thank you all so much. We're only going to go to about 1:30. We're going to talk about tornadoes and how they form, and about hail. Of course, we just got finished with a severe weather event where Jonesboro got hit. And if you watched Weather School last week, do you remember? Not last week, because last week was spring break. The week before last, where I talked about severe weather, and I said all tornadoes are survivable. Not a single person died in that tornado in Jonesboro this weekend, and because they were well prepared, and there were other factors that went into it, but it was, I just want to say it's possible. As you look at tornadoes like that, and I want the kids to know that there's no reason to panic when there's severe weather. Never panic. Because they're all survivable. And we can rebuild your home. But we want you to be safe. And I want to give you a little better understanding of hail, how that's formed today, and how tornadoes form. So, I've got a lot of graphics to go through and some video. Look at this. This is an incredible video from March of 2018 with a massive hailstorm that went through Arkansas and into Whitehall from Teresa. Look at this. That is some incredible hail. Again, 2 years ago, listen to it. How does that form? Why does that form? All right, well, let's talk about how hail forms. First of all, you have to have a thunderstorm, obviously, and these tower up tens of thousands of feet into the atmosphere. Come on, computer. Bear with me for just 1 second. So they tower up tens of thousands of feet into the atmosphere. Once you know it, it's locking up on me. Come on, computer. There we go. Updrafts. That's what a thunderstorm is. A bunch of updrafts and downdrafts. And there's a freezing level, and it can vary, from 8,000 to 10,000 to 12,000 feet up into the atmosphere. So we have all this warm air here at the surface. But up in the thunderstorm, it's cold. It's below freezing when you get up to several thousand feet. So you have these updrafts. You have a hailstone. Do you see that hailstone right there? So the updrafts, they take that small, tiny little piece of ice because it froze as rain, a rain droplet froze, came down, and the updrafts push it back up into the air that's below freezing. Then it falls back down, and the updrafts will push it back up above that freezing level, and that hailstone grows. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger until gravity takes over, and the updrafts from the thunderstorm, the air going upward, sometimes it can get up to 100 miles per hour. But that weight of the hailstone just can't be sustained by those updrafts, and gravity takes it down to the earth and it falls. Now, do you see all these rings? Every time that there's a process of where it goes up and down and ice keeps accumulating along that hailstone, it'll go down to where it's below freezing. It becomes wet, then it refreezes. It collects more water down here. And it's a cycle that keeps going until it gets bigger and bigger. But if you look at a hailstone, I don't ever want you to do this because you could hurt yourself, but if you were to cut a large hailstone open, you would see rings, very much like the rings of a tree. And they represent a cycle through the thunderstorm. So this one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7. That would be 6 or 7 cycles through a thunderstorm, just like a tree ring. And that tells you how many times it makes a trip through the thunderstorm. Now, how do we measure the hail size? Very important, especially when you're reporting hail to Channel 7 or the National Weather Service. A lot of people will use, they'll say marble size hail. Well, that's not a good indicator to us because marbles vary in sizes. It's usually small, but they vary in size. So these are the things that we use in the meteorological community to understand the size of the hail. And once you get up to 1 inch in diameter, that's severe. You get up to golf ball size, tennis ball. See, we use those as indicators because we're all familiar with what a golf ball size hail, the size of that is. We know the size of a tennis ball. We know the size of a baseball or a softball or a grapefruit. So we know those sizes, so we can relate to that and understand, get a better understanding. And a friend of mine said, Todd, one way to make baseball size hail less destructive, we need to start making baseballs smaller. That's a joke, everybody. And again, once you get up to 1 inch in diameter, that's when we consider the hail severe. Usually we get very common hail 1 inch in diameter or less. That's very common. But it's extremely rare to get it up to 4.5 inches in diameter. However, it did happen last year in Arkansas, in Vandervoort, in Polk County. It has happened before. Now let's turn our attention to tornadoes, something that we had to deal with just this past weekend, right? Tornadoes, and and obviously if we saw that video coming out of Jonesboro, we saw it was obvious. There was no doubt it was a tornado. But sometimes it's not so obvious what happened, especially when they occur at night. So investigators go in, meteorologists, and they survey the damage. And they look at the pattern of the damage. So when a tornado comes through, the debris is pointing in different directions. The trees or whatever it is, they're uprooted or they're snapped and they fall in different directions. When severe thunderstorm winds come through, high winds come through, usually they're all laying down in the same direction as the air comes down, hits the ground, out of the thunderstorm, and spreads out, and all the debris is facing the same direction. Now, I want to show you video here. We're going to get back to, stand by here. I'm going to show you some video of our sister station in KAIT in Jonesboro, and Zach Holder, meteorologist, who was on the air while that tornado hit Jonesboro on Saturday. And watch the video because I'm going to show you how this formed. There's no audio that Zach has here, but you can see this is the wall cloud up in here. There's Zach realizing that there's a tornado, which he stayed very calm, which is tough to do when you have a situation like that. You see the winds. Those are trees getting uprooted out of the ground. It's hitting things and throwing debris into the air. Radar can actually see the debris. And we have a detector on the radar, a product that we use, that we can actually see this and look at the huge amounts of debris getting sucked up into that tornado. All right, so we want to know, how do tornadoes form? And again, that's from our sister station, KAIT in Jonesboro, Ryan Vaughn and Zach Holder. So how do those tornadoes form? Well, you have to have wind shear. Winds changing direction with height. We went over this a couple of weeks ago. Let's say they're southeasterly at the surface, but above our heads, they're stronger and they're coming out of a different direction, maybe out of the south or the southwest. So that's winds changing direction with height. So you have to have wind shear developing. That creates a horizontal rotating column of air. Now, you can't see these with the eye. Sometimes we can see these on visible satellite imagery, but this creates a horizontal rotating column of air. Now, a thunderstorm begins to develop in that environment, and you get thunderstorm updrafts developing. And what it does is it tilts that rotating column of air, it lifts it and tilts it into the vertical, and you get a mesocyclone. That's what's called a mesocyclone. And from that, it's a wall cloud. And you saw that Zach was standing in front of that big cloud, that lowering. And out of that wall cloud, that rotating column of air continues to spin downward. And if it touches the ground, it's a tornado. If it doesn't touch the ground, it's a funnel cloud. Now, one of the things that meteorologists do that I have a bad habit of doing, but you hear this all the time. You'll hear a meteorologist say, okay, a confirmed tornado on the ground. That is extremely redundant. I do it all the time, and I try to stop it. First of all, I wish I didn't have to say it, but that's redundant because the very definition of a tornado is that it's on the ground. If it's not on the ground, it's called a funnel cloud. So what we should be saying is it's confirmed tornado. Tornado on the ground, again, that's redundant, but it's something that you just got to get out of the habit of saying. So the tornado terminology that we have to use, remember, a watch means, and we had this on Saturday, means that conditions are favorable for tornadoes to form. That just means you need to be prepared. A warning means you need to take action. Find the interior of your home or your business, put as many walls between you and the outside, because one has been either spotted or indicated by radar. In some instances, like Saturday, a tornado emergency is issued. That means that there is severe threat to human life or catastrophic damage. Now, I'm not quite sure the emergency was issued, but there was that radar confirmation. Should have been one if there wasn't, but because we knew one was on the ground. But when a tornado emergency is issued, and one was issued on, I remember, May 27th of 2014. That means that it is confirmed doing damage. We know that it's there. So what should you do? And again, I always tell kids, your homework assignment, I want you to find that safe place in your house. The interior of your home. Go to the center part, lowest floor, away from windows. Cover your head with maybe a blanket, pillow, or a helmet. But see that area highlighted in green? That's where you want to be. You want to find the interior of your home or your business. Put as many walls between you and the outside. If you have a storm cellar, that's fantastic. That's where you should go. Like I said, you should never panic. All tornadoes are survivable. Every single one of them. I don't think I have any more graphics to show you. Oh, nope, we got that one, but I already did it. Now I'm going to show you some video, and I'm going to take your questions here in just a second. This is video from the damage in Jonesboro. From our Live Storms media partner, Brett Adair. And like I said, there are places, it's hard to tell here, but let me see if I can show you. Up here towards the top, you see these walls? These are the interior walls. So this is why we say we want you to take cover in these in the center part, because those are the areas that are going to be the least likely to collapse. And there are places in there where people were, and you see these interior walls where they were able to take cover, and there were injuries, but there were no fatalities. Like I said, all tornadoes are survivable. Very important too. If you're ever, and again, here's another example of why you don't need to be in a building like this, one that doesn't have many walls. It's a big warehouse, because those roofs can collapse. Again, this is video from Live Storms Media. Just looking at some of these, it's just incredible. There were injuries, but nobody died. And a lot of that went with, it's not F4 damage. This is EF3 damage, winds of 140 miles per hour. But you see areas where the structures, it's destroyed, obviously. That's another term we use, completely destroyed. That's redundant too. But you see them destroyed, but there are places that you can go within these buildings that are safe. Very important too, if this ever does happen in your hometown, and we all pray that it never does, always remember, don't go out and try to see the damage. Don't get in your car if it's on one end of the town, because emergency crews always need to have access to help people. You see parts of those structures are still remaining, and there are places where people can hide and take cover. A lot of times there are power lines down, and that's a big danger too. When power lines are snapped, and they can be live and hot, and people can get electrocuted. So that's another hazard after a tornado hits that people have to be aware of. Now I'd like to answer your questions. There were a lot of factors that went into the reasons why people were okay and were not. There were no fatalities, and I think one of them, the advanced warning, was there. Media gave the advanced warning up there in northeastern Arkansas. KAIT was on it. I think because it was in the daytime and not at night, when people were aware. And let's face it, a lot of those businesses that it hit, including the mall, were closed because of the coronavirus. And people were at home. Now it did hit homes, but they were taking cover. So there were a lot of factors, I think, that went into the fact that a lot of people made it through there and we didn't have any fatalities, which is just, it is amazing. It is a miracle to think that an EF3 goes through a highly populated area and there are 22 mostly minor injuries. All right, questions. Let me get this here. Natalie says, what's the worst tornado in Arkansas? Well, we've had a lot of really bad tornadoes. Of course, Mayflower, Valonia, Judsonia, Bald Knob. These places were hit back in the 50s and 60s in Conway. But the most powerful tornado to hit, a documented F5 back in 1929. That's actually the last time Arkansas was hit by an F5 tornado. I saw a lot of people on Facebook saying that when that Jonesboro tornado on Saturday, they were saying, "Oh, that's an F5. That's an F5." You can't look at a tornado and visually tell me just because of the width of it and that it's pulling up debris that it's an F5. You can't do that. You have to go. It's a damage scale. You have to go and survey the damage and understand how structures were built. If they were poorly built structures, then it wouldn't take much wind to destroy them. If they were well-built structures, tied down with anchor bolts and ties, and they were blown off their foundation, then it would take a much higher wind speed in order to do that. So they have to go in, engineers and meteorologists. Tim Marshall, one of the most well-known of storm surveyors, was up there in Jonesboro after that damage. Saw some pictures of him, and I know Ryan Vaughn got to meet him. But they go in and they look at these structures that were hit, and they can tell how well they were built and assign a rating to it and understand what sort of winds it took to cause the damage. So they are highly trained, and these scales, the enhanced Fujita scale, first developed by Theodore Fujita at the University of Chicago, these are constantly being refined to understand how structures are built and how different structures are impacted by high winds. All right, any other questions? How many tornadoes has Arkansas had? Well, this year we've had 18. In an average tornado count, 33. And we're already at 18. Last year, we had exactly 33. Some years are much worse than others. We've had, 80-something tornadoes in 2008. Or is it 100-something? Anyway, we've had some incredible years where we can get close to 100 tornadoes. And in some years, it's less than 20. But the average is 33. Great question. Most Sawyer, age 7 asks, how long does a tornado last? Well, it just depends. But they usually don't. Most tornadoes in Arkansas don't last all that long. They're usually on the ground for a few seconds or just for a few minutes. I think the Jonesboro tornado was on the ground for about 14, 15, or 16 minutes. The long track EF4 tornado of Super Tuesday, February 5th, 2008, was on the ground, I think, for more than an hour. Well more than an hour. So it just depends. The stronger ones are typically on the ground a lot longer than the weaker ones. The weaker ones touch down and lift right back up in just a matter of seconds or a few minutes. So they're usually not on the ground very long here in Arkansas. We tend to have the weaker end of the EF scale tornadoes. That EF3 is actually pretty rare for Arkansas. EF4s are even more rare. And like I said, we haven't had an F5 since 1929. Knock on wood, right? All right. Here's one. What helps a building stay intact during a tornado? It's how well it's built. I'm not an engineer, but you have to make sure that your house, or if you're building a house, that it is built to code. That's one of the problems that they run into, from my understanding, from what I've heard, that you have to make sure that they're built to code and that they have anchor bolts and they have the ties that are necessary to hold down the house. So those are things, if you're building a house, you need to look into. And maybe even install a storm shelter. Here's a good question. Are tornadoes in higher elevations? There's a myth that mountains protect people from tornadoes. That's a myth. That's not true. Again, I'll give you an example. We had tornadoes just a few weeks ago in northwest Arkansas in the higher elevations. The EF4 tornado of February 5th, 2008 tracked through up and down mountains. So, no, that is a myth. Mountains do not stop tornadoes. Great question here. Can a funnel cloud cause damage? No. A funnel cloud does not cause damage, but if there's a funnel cloud and it touches down, it becomes a tornado. Now, there can be thunderstorm winds within that thunderstorm producing the funnel cloud that can cause damage, but typically funnel clouds, that's a tornado aloft, and once it touches down, it's deemed a tornado. But no, funnel clouds don't cause damage. If they do cause damage, they're not tornadoes. But when we see a funnel cloud, a tornado warning will be issued because it can touch down at any moment. Here's a good one. Does water stop tornadoes? No, it does not. They become water spouts. Very common. We've had them going over Lake Washita. I have video on my other computer here of a tornado from a few years ago. I think it's 2012 or 13 of going right across Lake Washita. So they do not stop. Sorry, I'm sorry if I'm not answering your questions. A lot of these are scrolling very quickly through here. Here's a question here. I read in a book that hail sometimes smells a little like mint. Is that true? I don't smell. I don't think that's true. All right, here. Where's the question? Lana, age 12. What part of the state is called Tornado Alley and why? Well, it's not it's the United States. What part of the United States is in Tornado Alley? And those that's from Texas through Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota, even parts of maybe far western Arkansas and western Missouri up through Iowa. That's considered Tornado Alley. But there are years when they don't see as many tornadoes as areas east of Tornado Alley. So depending on the year, that can fluctuate. But that's the most prone area in the United States historically. But there are times when other areas see more tornadoes compared to Tornado Alley. Here's a great question. Is a culvert a safe place to go? That would be the last place to go. If you're in a car, you always hear, oh, get out of your car and get into a ditch. No, here's what you should do. If you're in a car and there's a tornado approaching, the first thing you should do is look around and see if there's a sturdy structure that you can seek shelter in. Also, if you can safely point your car in another direction, determine which direction the tornado is heading, and go the opposite direction, if you can do that safely, that's recommended. If those two options do not exist, that's when you get into the culvert and protect your head. But remember, those are very difficult to do because if there's a storm with a tornado, there's likely water and rain, and those fill up quickly with water. So that's what I would do. That's your last case scenario or your last case thing to do. All right. Can twin tornadoes become on one big tornado? Yes. They can combine. One can get ingested. A smaller one can get ingested into a bigger one. We've seen video of that happening with these circulations. I've seen 3 tornadoes out of one storm at the same time, and one becomes more dominant. So yes, that can happen. Usually with the much bigger storms out in the plains, we see that happening. All right, let's see here. Extremely low. We're not worried about severe weather today. If that changes, we'll let you know. What happens to the debris when it falls? Well, that's another issue, of course, because people can get hurt by debris. And that's the main reason why one of the reasons I would think a lot of people get hurt by tornadoes. That's why we ask you to have a way to protect your head if you are in the direct path of a tornado. All right. Here's a great question. Caden in first grade wants to know why tornadoes are dark. Well, that's a condensation funnel, and it's like a cloud rotating, and it's condensing, so it's kind of gray like a cloud. However, whatever it's sucking up, it's like a giant vacuum cleaner, for lack of better words. It can take on the color of whatever it's sucking up. You'll see these tornadoes move over a lake and then they turn kind of whitish because it's sucking up water. Or what about the, if you've ever driven out in Oklahoma, a lot of the soil out there is red. Sometimes they could take a reddish tint to them because it's sucking up red. Maybe it's darker because it's sucking up some dirt that's darker in nature. The soil is dark, so it can take on the color of whatever it is ingesting into it. So that's why sometimes you see them a different color. But typically, what you're seeing is a condensational funnel. It's rapidly rising air, and that's water vapor. It's condensing, and it's like a cloud, an extremely fast spinning cloud. The last place you want to be is in your car, by the way. That's a myth. Tornadoes can go over hills. That's a myth. Whoop. Here's one. Lily, age 10, wants to know, ask how long hailstorms usually last. They can last quite a while, and they move. They move with the thunderstorm. So it doesn't last all that long at your particular location because these thunderstorms are moving. But a thunderstorm can put hail out for miles and miles and miles. And if it's continuously having the updrafts and the downdrafts capable enough of getting that cycle going. And we saw that, I think it was March 10th of 2018, where it was a wide swath of hail from western Arkansas right through Whitehall into southeast Arkansas. It did the most damage from Benton, especially towards Whitehall. So that they could put out a hail track that could last for many, many, many miles. But at one particular location, it won't last all that long because that thunderstorm is moving. It's coming up on almost 1:30, and I want to encourage everybody to download the KATV Weather app, the news app. That's where we stream live any sort of severe weather coverage. Download that news app and the weather app. They're both free. You get our forecast, of course, on our weather app and then live streaming on the news app. And I believe the governor is going to be having a press conference coming up at about 1:30, which you can find on Facebook. You can also find at KATV.com or turn on Channel 7. And I'll be on Good Afternoon Arkansas at 3 o'clock and Channel 7 News at 5. Chief Meteorologist Barry Brandt at 6 and at 10. So I hope you learned something, and I'm going to have more weather schools. So if you have an idea, send it to me on Facebook, tweet me. Let me know if you want a lesson. This was all about hail and how tornadoes form. And I think it's relevant just because of the time of the year and especially what happened on Saturday. And I hope the kids learn something. And just remember, as I always say, when there's a tornado warning issued, the last thing you should ever do is panic, because the chances are you're going to be just fine. I think all tornadoes are survivable if you do the right thing and you know that place to go. And I showed you where's the safest place to go in your home. You go there when a tornado warning is issued. You have a way to receive warnings, whether the app or the NOAA Weather Radio, the KATV Weather app or NOAA Weather Radio. You get those warnings and act upon those warnings. Chances are you're going to be just fine. We'll fix your house, get that insurance will take care of that, or get rebuilt one way or the other. We want to make sure you are okay. And we want to always thank you very much for trusting us at Channel 7, the team with the most experience. And I'm going to start getting ready for our Good Afternoon Arkansas show. Have a great one, and thank you for coming to Weather School Lesson number 2. Looking forward to Weather School Lesson number 3, and I'll let you know when.